King Kill /33 degree James Shelby Downard and Michael Hoffman. The power of the secret government over the news media continues unabated. During the time of the Watergate scandal, major scandals of the past were reviewed, but the torture and murder of Captain William Morgan in 1826, from which developed an anti-Mason political party which challenged Freemason Andrew Jackson for the presidency. General Jackson was involved with the Bell Witch, and the murder of Joseph Smith the Mormon prophet, which resulted in the men of the Mormon Church withdrawing from Freemasonry, were major scandals that were ignored. The Kennedy assassination has to do with Masonic sorcery, and the information present in these pages is well known to certain news agencies who have chosen to suppress it, just as the motivation for the assassination has been plunged into cryonic secrecy, for facts concerning the assassination are supposed to be revealed in the future, which is a matter of public knowledge. That freeze wait revive plan is part of the master plan of Masonic sorcery. The ability of the secret government to immobilize the release of vital information to the public is in part due to the apathy of American people who have been benumbed by revelation after revelation. It is a peculiar phenomena that certain revelations move people to action while episodic revelations of the same type stun them into inaction. Have devoted years to trying to draw attention to Masonic sorcery and its relationship to political control. Believe that many people instinctually realize the power that Freemasonry exerts on the government of the United States, but since they have been hoodwinked, they do not realize what the secrecy, silence, and darkness that surrounds the mysteries of the Masonic art amounts to, and what Masonry really is. So control of the government of the United States is just traced to Wall St, and not to the crossroads of witchcraft. An archetype of betrayal of the common man, i.e. the vulgar herd, has been and is going on, and the betrayal, which involves a great deal of fertility and death symbolism, is seemingly motivated by the endeavor to bring about syncretism in opposing principles of a mystic power, and to green Israel, rebuild the Temple of Solomon, and establish a one world government. It is by way of Masonic sorcery that the union of opposing principles is supposed to be brought about, and the people that practice Masonic sorcery are arch criminals who have been and are perpetrating a crime against humanity. The arch criminals staged managed Dallas in the killing of Kennedy and the news media reaction ever since. There are today thousands or perhaps millions who are apathetic to the control that exists over us, and who labor under the misapprehension that somehow life can be beautiful if we only forget and discard our ideals while getting onto the business of consumption. America is a news ghetto where the news media continually endeavors to promote apathy while going through the motions, the lip sync, of reform. Like a haunted house draining its occupants of will in return for sleep without nightmares, American people are mental captives of a horror that feeds them misinformation as its stone bell tolls the death of individuality. There is no happy last-minute rescue awaiting just around tomorrow, because Americans do not have the truth about things around which to rally, and most just want money which would enable them to get the things that they have been told that they should and must have. Publish this, in the wake of the situation Charles Seymour alluded to. The moralist unquestionably secures wide support, but he also wearies his audience. Well, many Americans have gone beyond being tired, for they have been so benumbed by the revelations that they are apathetic. In other words, they just don't give a damn. Some, however, try to justify their lack of feeling about the revelations, and have heard some say, as though they were puzzled by a difficult question, why should let such things upset me? Well, to those people who are not completely lost in apathy, and to those who are not apathetic yet, say my condemnation of the Masonic evil is not moralizing, and if they find out about the things that have been done to bring about the union in opposing principles of a mystic power and discover what the master plan has planned for them, they will not surrender to apathy and will get fighting mad. We'll now make this a matter of record. Most Freemasons apparently have no idea of the evil that is part of Masonry, and if they do know about it, they don't believe it, nor do most members of the clandestine lodges and Masonic oriented fraternal organizations. The same thing holds true for androgynous Masonic societies and the secret societies of women that are Masonry oriented, for Masonry is a secret anomalous thing. In other words, most Freemasons are apparently unaware of the Masonic cryptocracy in the United States, and that also holds true for the aforementioned Masonic-oriented societies. Overview: it is certain that onomatology, or the science of names, forms a very interesting part of the investigations of the higher Masonry, and it is only in this way that any connection can be created between the two sciences. Encyclopedia of Freemasonry: when the ancients saw a scapegoat, they could at least recognize him for what he was, a pharmakos, a human sacrifice. When modern man sees one, he does not, or refuses to, recognize him for what he is. Instead he looks for scientific explanations to explain away the obvious. Thomas SSASS, Ceremonial Chemistry: the science of names forms only one segment of the science of symbolism used by Masons. Names, i.e. words in themselves, are merely descriptions, and they rise and fall in usage like a Cartesian doll, with some words becoming archaic very quickly. What's more, some words are given meanings that are known only to the initiated, while other words are profound and abstruse, so the science of names gets real weird even before it is identifiable as word wizardry by beginning investigators of it. The JFK assassination encounters the science in a decisive way and contains a veritable nightmare of symbol complexes having to do with violence, perversion, conspiracy, death, and degradation. These elements are important not only as cause and effect in the murder of a president, but in the ensuing reaction of the people of America and the world. The fertility and death symbolism in the killing of the king, right, which is part of greening ritualism that has to do with JFK, has been suppressed because examination of it must necessarily link it to Freemasonry and its mysticism, as well as to the political influence it exerts. Obviously this would do some damage to public confidence in a Masonic progressivism, i.e. liberty, equality, fraternity, b. those who have shielded the conspirators, and c. the entire mental concept that passes for knowledge about the genuine nature of the government of these United States. A note on structure: Chapter 13 is divided into two headings, sets and subset. Because of the intricate synchronicity of the events, concepts, and personalities involved, there is redundancy and an overlap in categories in presenting the information. The redundancy, i.e. the repetition, is considered necessary for better understanding, and the overlap, i.e. the extending over of the outlined parts, has to do with the interrelation of the things being explained. Chapter 13 Set I. The Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club, monks of Medmenham, friars of St. Francis, was a society of ruffians and drunkards who engaged in sexual orgies similar to those of the Mollies, Gormogans, Mankylers, Blasters, Mohawks, Sweaters, She-Romps Club, the Fun Club, etc. They also engaged in political agitation and conspiracy. They were dedicated to the destruction of the Catholic Church. The membership was highly placed in the British government. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the First Lord of the Admiralty, the Prince of Wales, and the Lord Mayor of London all shared in the privileges of the Hellfire Club. Benjamin Franklin, who was initiated into Freemasonry at St. John's Lodge in Philadelphia and who is credited with publishing the first Masonic book in America, was also a member, as well as being connected with the Lodge of the Nine Sisters in France. Benjamin Franklin and Sir Francis Dashwood, founder of the Hellfire Club, wrote a prayer book which became the basis of the Book of Common Prayer that is used in many American Protestant churches. Because Sir Francis Dashwood was the so-called Lord L.E. Despenser, his prayer book, in England, was referred to as the Franklin Despenser Prayer Book. In the United States that book was called the Franklin Prayer Book. The book was composed at Dashwood's Manor House at West Wickham, the site of numerous rites of magica. Sexualis, sex magic. Franklin and Dashwood created their volume of entreaties in between sodomy-sucking sorcery sessions. Eventually Dashwood dug a huge cave on his West Wickham estate to facilitate the performance of sex magic. Later a road was constructed to High Wycombe which utilized soil taken from the cave dug by the Hellfire Club. Brunei University is located in High Wycombe and F. H. George, Ph.D. is director of its world-renowned cybernetic department. George defines cybernetics thus: it is a science concerned with all matters of controls and communication, and to this extent it trespasses across what we have come to think of as the established sciences. Cybernetics, of course, is intimately concerned with artificial or machine intelligence. This concern is predicated, to a certain degree, on human cooperation with machines. The science of symbolism is part of the sciences of mathematics and cybernetics. Cf. Set il, Sexual Geometry. Miss Chudley, the Dalai Lama for the Hellfire Club was a Jewess. Certainly she was not Miss at the time she was called Miss Chudley by Horace Walpole, nor was her name Chudley at that time. Chudley was the name of a town and she was a woman of common property there. The fact that her name was concealed is of mystical import, since when the Dalai Lamas were performing sexual perversions in Hellfire Club rituals, complete secrecy regarding the identity of the harlot was viewed as essential. This concealment has to do with the secrecy and silence of Masonry. Harpocrates, the Greek god of secrecy and silence, whose statue was often placed at the entrance of temples, caves and other places where the mysteries were performed, was of symbolical importance to the Hellfire Club. A statue of Harpocrates which depicted him holding a finger to his mouth was one of a number of statues used on club premises. On April 24, 1783, Pope Clement XII, a bitter foe of Magica Sexualis, issued his celebrated bill of excommunication entitled /N Eminenti Apostolatus Specula. It specifically decreed, in order to close the widely open road to iniquities which might be committed with impunity and also for other reasons, just and reasonable, that have come to our knowledge, we have resolved and decreed to condemn and forbid such societies, assemblies, reunions, conventions, aggregations, or meetings called either Freemasonic or known under some other denomination. We condemn and forbid them by this, our present Constitution, which is to be considered valid forever. Due to Pope Clement's decree, Miss Chudley faced pressure outside of England. As an act of defiance, King Frederick Il became Chudley's protector and bedfellow. Still, this was not so outrageous, since Prussia was not considered a Catholic country, but Poland was. It was here that Prince Radziwill, the ancestor of the husband of Jacqueline Kennedy's sister, took the whore Chudley. The Radziwill fortune was considered the greatest in their nation. The family itself was related to the Hohenzollerns and the Romanovs. According to legend, Miss Chudley carried a mystical taint. According to the Masonry of Cagliostro, magnetic Masonry, there exists a thing described as the transfer of magnetic force. This mystical taint is supposedly attached to those who traffic in ritual sex perversions. According to the record, the fortunes of the Radziwills have declined ever since. Cf. Set 4, Kennedy, Bale and Bouvier. Set il Sexual Geometry. Geometry is a branch of mathematics dealing with measurements, and relationships of points, lines, planes, solids, and theorems. A theorem is described as being a proposition that can be proved from accepted premises. Essentially, a theorem is an axiom. Euclidean geometry is called an axiomatic system, and theorems are based upon Euclidean geometry. The Euclidean theorem having to do with the right-angle triangle, which is that the sum of the squares of the two shorter sides are equal to the square of the longest side, is traced to Pythagoras and then to the ancient Egyptian religion, where the right-angle triangle symbolically expressed the sexual relationship between Osiris and Isis, which produced Horus. The right-angle triangle theorem is part of the third degree of Masonry and is there called the 47th problem of Euclid. Recall that the science of symbolism is considered to have an analogous relationship to Masonry. The analysis of such relationships can be said to be symbolized by an abacus, the most elementary computer form. In the study of cybernetic hardware, one inevitably encounters axiomatic systems. Dr. F. H. George of the Department of Cybernetics of Brunei University states that axiomatic systems are precise systems based on assumptions. C.F. Bierce's The Devil's Dictionary under gravitation. If an axiomatic computer begins with some assumption and through analysis arrives at a necessary truth, it is then able to apply the rule of inference. The rule of inference is described as the ability to draw a conclusion. Dr. George provides an example: I am in Buckinghamshire, from the assumptions, am in High Wycombe and High Wycombe is in Buckinghamshire. Such a conclusion is a necessary truth which would be acknowledged by the axiomatic computer at Brunei University. Let us establish a hypothesis in which this computer at Brunei, in High Wycombe, could, in the twinkling of an all-seeing eye, come to some conclusions that would be spectacular. It could decide that its axioms were Euclidean and that by way of the 47th problem of Euclid that it was Masonic, and by way of the third degree of Masonry, that it had had assassination denotations, and then by the same chain of deduction conclude that it had fertility divinity, Osiris, Isis, Horus, associations. Call attention to these potentialities to demonstrate how an axiomatic computer may stray and imagine itself the deus ex machina, and then after a series of calculations, conclude that it is of the fertility god type and identify with the people of the Hellfire Club, since the old dirt road traveled by them from West Wycombe to High Wycombe might well be considered to lead to the very door of the Brunei computer. Hence it is within the realm of probability that cyborg is a swinging god that swings both ways. Very few are actually privy to the internal workings of this computer, whose functions are concealed. One would need to exist in a sympathetic relationship with such a machine in order to communicate with it totally. In Masonry, the Brethren of the Mystic Tie symbolizes a sympathetic, nonverbal understanding, a spirit of Masonry described thus: in some voiceless Masonic way, most people in that saloon had become aware that something was in the process of happening. Wister's Virginian. This illustrates a sympathetic relationship that does exist between some. Now, when such a sympathetic relationship exists between people and a computer, you have the making of a community mind and people without individuality. Seth E. Lee Macbeth and Scotland. Before pointing to the mystical associations between the murder of the president and Shakespeare's tragedy of Macbeth, wished to call attention to the appearance of the witches in Act, Scene 1, and to the line in which they chant "Fair is foul, and foul is fair." This is reminiscent of Hermetic art, alchemy, as well as the individuation or shaping of an integrated personality in the psychology of C.G. Jung, in which the archetype of unity, self-head, autocephalus, the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Hatov of the Jews, and the mingling of all with all is manifested. Next, it is important to note the appearance of Hecate to the three witches in Macbeth. Hecate is triple-countenanced, and being threefold in aspect, she is known as Diana on earth, Luna in heaven, and Hecate in hell. These three women, of course, comprise one of the triads of Western mythology. Such triads were a central part of ancient religions, and the mystical triad idea became part of Masonic symbolism. In fact, there is a triad of three governing officers to be found in almost every degree, and in the higher degrees there exists a symbolical triad that presides under various names, just as Hecate presides in different places under various names. Crossroads were considered sacred to Diana Hecate, the deity who is both virgin and whore. Fair is foul, and foul is fair, and such crossroads were the favored sites of the wanton women/witches and the Grand Masters, Masonic sorcerers, who were her votaries. Crossroads were and are of significance to ritual sex magic. The wearing of clothes of the opposite sex and the performance of bisexual acts are so-called crossroad rites. The women engaging in these perversions were, in the vernacular, referred to as dykes, and it was said that they traveled the old dyke road and the old dirt road. These sorts of activities are extremely secret, in keeping with the lore of Hecate as illustrated in the saying Tacitus bibens conchum sacri jubar, Hecate triformis, triple Hecate, who giveth forth rays cognizant of secret mysteries. Crossroads were also places of human and animal sacrifice, and such rites were often carried out in conjunction with magica sexualis, since the participants recognized an existing relationship between fertility and death. Hecate is therefore also identified as a death goddess, and her sex and death attributes are similar to those ascribed to Venus, Aphrodite, Prone, Kypris. Macbird. The idea for the play Macbird possibly originated at an anti-war rally in Berkeley, California, when Barbara Garson, in a speech, referred to the then First Lady of the United States as Lady Macbird Johnson. Subsequently, she is said to have decided to write a play based on Shakespeare's Macbeth and to have it performed at the International Day of Protest, but it actually had its premiere at the Village Gate Theatre in Greenwich Village, New York. Newspaper publisher William Loeb charged that Garson's Macbird implies that President Lyndon Johnson and Mrs. Johnson were conspiratorially involved in the JFK assassination. Loeb asked his newspaper's attorney to research immediately if there is any action this newspaper can take to ask the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York to request the appropriate court to issue an injunction against the further showing of Macbird. Newspapers throughout the country took up the cry, and a drama critic for United Press International wrote, "Macbird presented yesterday at the Village Gate is a sophomoric, heavy-handed parody of Macbeth that strikes a new low in theatrical taste." The word sophomore is derived from the Greek word sophos meaning wise and moros meaning foolish. Granted, it seemed foolish for Barbara Garson to challenge the system with the play Macbird, but let us see if there is anything shrewd, astute, or erudite about the Barbara Garson parody, as well as if it displays any occult knowledge. In the words of Erasmus, can Barbara Garson be said to be a morosopher, a wise fool? Link to the Macbeth clan. Clansmen were divided into two classes, those who were related by blood and those individuals and groups who were under clan protection. Consequently, clans had sects of different appellations, and people with the same surname are known to have been attached to different clans. The Macbeth clan is related, in a clannish manner, to the Bane clan. The lack of clear distinctions between blood relatives and those under clan protection in Scottish genealogy has become so complex as to baffle expert genealogists who are not at all positive as to who begot or protected whom. Numerous Scottish names are rendered with a variety of spellings, and it is a matter of record that the sons of many Scotsmen spelled their names differently from their fathers. With this in mind, consider a clan listing having to do with the Bane and Macbeth clan structure. The listing, although it cannot be considered fully comprehensive, is considered somewhat more authentic than other clan lists. Bane, Maabine, Mackay, McNab Bane, Maabine, Mackay, McNab_Bean, Maabine Beathy, Macbeth Benny, Macbean McBain, Maabine Maabeth, Macbean Macbeth, Maabine, Masilvan, Maabine Melvin, Macbeth. The Macbeth, Macbean, and the Macbeth, Maabine part of this clan structure apparently had tartans of their own. Mac, of course, means son of, and all the masons of the Bane, Bean, Beathy, Benny, Beath, Beth clans all publicly claim to have the same ancestor. The Banes, in keeping with this name exchange, are apt to refer to the same clan even though the spelling may be Bane, Banes, or even Bane, as it has sometimes appeared. All of these are in a clan structure with Macbeth. Bane means, among other things, any fatal cause of mischief, injury, or destruction. The Bean clan is also conspicuous in the Baines Macbeth genealogy. Bean is a name given to several kinds of leguminous seeds, and it is a synonym for the word fairy. There exists in Scottish legend a Bane fairy which was considered a death fairy and is said to have called on the Macbeth clan. There are other legends pertaining to the Bane Bridge. Old tellers of this ancient bridge story maintain that the Bane fairy was the keeper of the Bane Bridge. The Bane Bridge therefore has a death fairy guardian, which may also be present in the depiction of a troupe of performers in the painting of the Dance Macabre that is on the ceiling of a Spruerbrook, covered bridge, that crosses the Reuss River at an abstruse angle at Lucerne, Lucerne Latin for lantern, Switzerland. At the point of the angle in midstram lies a tower in which a large lantern is prominently hung. From time to time the tower light has been known to shine on members of the Dance Macabre painting. Perhaps then certain of them are expected to make an appearance and take their bows on the stage of life. The Bainbridge story is also interesting in connection with the American battleship Bainbridge, which was dedicated by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Because have only read government reports about the Bainbridge and viewed pictures of it, cannot say that such a ship indeed was or is afloat, but since the Bainbridge is symbolically a harbinger of death, mention it in connection with this study. Mystery and words is associated with the Bain Bean Mabith, as the reader can certainly understand now. Bain, in French, means, among other things, bath. There are, obviously, many different types of baths: sweat baths, mineral water baths, champagne baths, milk baths, blood baths, baptismal baths, the resurrection bath of alchemy, denoting rebirth and purification or absolution baths given before the performance of heinous deeds such as the baths given to the Masonic Knights of the Bath. So there are many ritual aspects to the bath. For example, when he was vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson of Blood Bath Association removed his shoes before entering a Muslim bathhouse reminiscent of the rite of discalcation in the third degree of Masonry having to do with assassination. There are of course some plot discrepancies between the tragedy of Macbeth and the tragedy of John Kennedy, but then this too is somewhat typical. A very queer source-rouse strategy of the Masons is to plot murders using assassins who can be accused of murdering Masons and on the other are actually those who murder anti-Masons or symbolical scapegoats, at Masonic behest. This name is as unusual as the coincidence and enfolding of the Macbeth-Kennedy tragedies, in which in the former Macbeth murders King Duncan while in the latter a certain Robert Duncan of Skirling bagpipes fame befriends Lyndon Baines Johnson and supports his bloody Vietnam policy. An explanation of this combination of name reversal and the interplay of spontaneity with preconceived patterns is at the core of a Masonic legend about three men, Squin de Flexion of Béziers, France, Nofodi of Florence, and a third, unknown man who made accusations against the Order of the Knights Templar which resulted in their downfall. These three alleged accusers of Templarism are also identified as Masonic assassins. There were numerous accusers of this order whose testimonies caused it to be abolished, as Orthodox history records. It is quite apparent that the attempt to establish three men as accusers and then to equate them with the infamous three assassins in Masonry has symbolical significance in the legend or plot of third-degree assassination. Another peculiar incident in the legend deals with the hanging of Marigini, a man who supposedly aided Squin de Flexion. Marigini was hanged at Montfaucon by order of Louis X some 2 years after the suppression of the Knights Templar. This was an act of revenge perpetrated through Templar treachery. The revenge they took was of a symbolical character. In the change of the legend of the third degree into that of the Templar system, when the martyr James Demolay was substituted for Hiram Abiff, the three assassins were represented by Squin de Flexion, Nofodi, and the unknown. As there is really no reference in the historical records of the persecution to this third accuser, it is most probable that he is altogether a mythical personage invented merely to complete the triad of assassins, and to preserve the congruity of the Templar with the Masonic legend. The unfortunate Marigini became a victim as a result of a plot change in the Templar/third degree legend and became symbolically synonymous with one of the three assassins and was therefore executed. Certainly neither Moro Safer Barbara Garson or anyone else could be expected to imagine that LBJ's friend, Duncan, might have some symbolical association with the King Duncan of the Macbeth tragedy. In relation to the magic and mystery of words, it was change of legend time. Franklin Cover and the Chandelier. Shortly before the assassination of President Kennedy, Macbeth was performed in the White House. The part of Macbeth was played by actor Franklin Cover. In a photograph taken at the performance, Franklin Cover is shown standing under a chandelier, and this picture was widely circulated in a national magazine. The particular chandelier is a magnificent work of art said to comprise 5,060 pieces of cut glass. Jacqueline Kennedy ordered the chandelier, or one exactly like it, removed from the White House as one of her last acts as First Lady. Chandeliers have tremendous symbolical importance in sorcery. For example, a chandelier is said to be the test of a jettatori's power. A jettator is a man possessed of the malachio, the evil eye. Jettator literally means, in Italian, thrower or one who casts. The act itself is called jettatura. A photograph was also taken of Mrs. Kennedy at the performance, also showing her standing under the same chandelier under which stood Franklin Cover in his Macbeth costume, if Mrs. Kennedy was not standing under that one, it was one identical to it. There is, in folklore, the superstition that when a wife believes her husband has been injured or killed by sorcerous means instigated by a jettator, she is to go to that jettatori's chandelier or the one she has seen him take position under and throw her shoe at it. None of this is intended to imply that Mr. Cover is a sorcerer, only that his picture under so symbolical an artifact is striking in and of itself. It is also a folk belief that the taking of position under a chandelier by a practitioner of the evil eye is accompanied by a sound. Slightly to the east of Crescent City, New Orleans, there is an area called Chandelier Sound. Beneath it, on many maps, are the words Freemason. The armed head. The oath of office of Lyndon Baines Johnson occurred on board the aircraft Angel, and a photograph of the event shows Mrs. Johnson wearing a poorly concealed grin. Mrs. Kennedy is crying. Apparently no one publicly identified these two differing moods with the classic symbol of Greek theater, nor did anyone allude to the lines from Macbeth, when the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, or so foul and fair a day. In Macbeth, Macbeth himself is said to be symbolized by an armed head. Kennedy can mean helmeted head. An armed head might well be considered a symbol of attack, and a helmeted head one of defense. The former was the first apparition conjured by the three witches and, according to experts, is a symbolical representation of Macbeth's helmeted head decapitated by Macduff. The second apparition is the Gore-child, which is supposed to be the infant Macduff who was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. The third vision was of a crowned child with a tree in his hand, Duncan's son Malcolm, who ordered his soldiers to cut down the boughs of Burnham Wood when moving to attack Macbeth's castle of Dungeness. The meaning attached to these symbols by the experts are just assumptions, and the authenticity of the assumed meanings are subject to question. There are a number of questions concerning the island of Lona, where Macbeth, along with 48 Scottish kings, 8 Danish and Norwegian kings, 4 Irish kings and 1 bishop of Canterbury, is buried in the consecrated graveyard of Relig Orain. This island has been designated at various times as Eilean na Druiniac, the sacred island of the Druids, St. Colm's Inch, Inchculme, Elcomkill, Ichelmkill, and Inhai. This womanless island in the Firth of Edinburgh, so called because of the dominion of the monk and Catholic saint, Columkill, Calm, or Columba, had its counterpart in a neighboring island called Women's Isle, where the wives of traders who had business on Lona were segregated. These women did not think highly of St. Calm or his inch. Inch can mean ounce, and oz is a Hebrew word meaning strong. Inch is derived from the Gael word meaning innis, which is probably connected to the Latin, insula. Icalmkill is supposed to translate as the island of Columbus Cell. And if this is so, it has a different meaning in English than the one it had in Scotland. As we have seen, Scottish etymology can bewilder. One such puzzle is the word heredum, used in the upper degrees of the continental Masonic rites. There is the Royal Order of Heredum, designated the new plus ultra of Masonry in Scotland, and in almost all the rites the Croix of Heredum is present. Nevertheless, the true meaning of the word is unknown generally, and this has gone on too long. The sages of old had already intimated in enigmas that God is the author of good, that like the sun in heaven, or Aesculapius on earth, he is healer, savior, and redeemer, the destroyer and averter of evil, ever healing the mischiefs inflicted by the wanton or irrational power of nature. Morals and dogma, Scottish rite, here sounds just too simple to actually describe such an involved phenomena as nature itself. It would therefore, by this same commonsensical logic, probably be silly for an etymologist to accept the folk speech cool d for kill d and then go on to describe this cool d entity as a gralatorial bird, aka the sandpiper or snipe, which are indigenous to marshy grounds and low water tidal flats such as those at Lindisfarne and Lona. Snipe are connected in legend with bags, and piper is suggestive of the bagmen known as bagpipers. On November 13, 1963, a large contingent of bagpipers made an appearance at the White House. These bagpipers were members of the Black Watch, Frisaden Dubh, a body of Scottish Highlanders organized in 1725 with the stated purpose of maintaining order. Later the name was applied to the Royal Highlanders Military Regiment. This oldest of Highland regiments wears a universal tartan to symbolize variety of clans united within it, the mingling of all with all. Its regimental cap badge, upon the star of the Order of the Thistle, and within a wreath of thistles the image of Saint Andrew holding before him his cross, all ensigned with the imperial crown, below the Sphinx superinscribed Egypt. Robert Bain, the clans and tartans of Scotland. It was Robert Bruce, the King of Scotland, who, under the name Robert, created the Order of St. Andrew of the Thistle on June 24, 1314, after the Battle of Bannockburn. This Saint Andrew of the Thistle symbol is connected with the rite of Haredom, and the Knights Templar. Saint Andrew's Day, the 30th of November, is the day of the annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and the Knight of St. Andrew of the Thistle, Chevalier Écossais de S. André du Chardon, is a degree of the Metropolitan Chapter of France, Scottish Rite Masonry. The Grand Scottish Knight of St. Andrew is a Hospitaller and or Templar degree, and the Knights of St. Andrew vowed to defend all orphans, maidens, and widows of good family, and wherever they heard of robbers or masterful thieves who oppressed the people, to bring them to the laws, to the best of their power. The conduct of the Templars with women and children, whether widowed or orphaned, is a matter of record, and their record is one of the reasons they were excommunicated and driven from France. The Sphinx superinscribed Egypt is an allusion to the legendary cradle of the science of symbolism. Even the kilts worn by the Scots are inspired by Egypt. The Gaelic proclamation of 1782 maintained that Highland dress was handed down from the beginning of the world. Returning to the Haredom palimpsest, numerous symbols superimposed in one area or occupying the same coordinates, one should note that it is derived from the Latin word, medieval, Haredom, signifying a heritage. One man who can be said to possess a very ancient heritage is the notorious Saint Germain, with whom Haredom is often associated. In his checkered career, this extraordinary personality is supposed to have known Jesus personally, been a conspirator in the Jacobin Masonry, and in the 19th century, a great master of the Great Brotherhood. Venerated, if not worshipped, by the Theosophical Society. Annie Besant was a leader of Theosophy, as well as being known as the servant of the Great Brotherhood. Besant is etymologically related to Bozant, Bozient, and Bausant are different renderings of the spelling of the war banner, Vexillum Belli, of the Knights Templar. Haredom is also related to the word Heodon, which is the name of an old Scottish mountain range. In addition, one can also trace this word to the two Greek words hieros and domos, which mean holy and house respectively. The holy house of the Masons is the Temple of Solomon, and all Masonic lodges are considered to be the Temple of Solomon. The religious complex on Lona and Lindisfarne both bear the appellation of Holy House, and Haredom is connected in many other ways to Lindisfarne by way of Lona. The dom of Haredom is a suffix denoting authority, jurisdiction, dominion, or realm. Consequently, Haredom is synonymous with wanton authority. Set for Kennedy, Bale, and Bouvier. The Kennedy family is, of course, a family of well-heeled politicians who have done things and been surrounded by history and events as mysterious as any washroom, smoke-filled room, or under-the-table transaction. As strange as it might first appear in reference to a family idolized in millions of issues of supermarket tabloids, one must wonder, in the face of a symbolism and attendant mysticism which surrounds this illustrious family, if somehow they have been used in someone else's game. Are the Kennedys hoodwink stooges? Recall Miss Judlate, the woman who served as the Great Whore, for a time with the sorcerer-oriented Hellfire Club. After the edicts and bulls issued by the Pope, Miss Judley was hard-pressed to find refuge on the continent, and yet she was finally successful in the camp of a supposedly Catholic Prince Radziwill in an undoubtedly Catholic country. This protection may have somehow caused the string of misfortunes which later befell the apostate Catholic Radziwill, since it was maintained that Madame Chudley was imbued with a curse or mystical taint due to her involvement in ritual sex perversions. At a dinner in the White House honoring Caroline Lee Radziwill, whose husband Stanislaus Radziwill was in London, President Kennedy interrupted a toast to Prince Stanislaus with the words, "We salute you, Stash, wherever you are." That is similar to Daniel Mannix's toast to Dashwood. Gore Vidal, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, and Caroline Lee Bouvier were the stepchildren of Hugh de Auchincloss. Mr. Vidal is of course a well-known author. Some of his work describes the Kennedys as an illusion-making clan and alleges they, the Kennedys, create illusion and call them facts. However, in fairness it should be noted that Vidal has also called them the Holy Family and the President and First Lady the Sun God and Goddess. When JFK was 22, Irene Wiley sculptured a likeness of him as a winged angel. Her work was presented to the Vatican where it was used as a part of a panel in which the angel hovers over St. Therese while she writes in a book. After his fatal trip to Dallas, President Kennedy's remains were codenamed Angel, and that was also the name of the flying hearse, Air Force One, which returned him to the Capitol. Tragedy seems to live with the Kennedy family, newspapers tell us. Indeed. Only a few years ago the son of Senator Ted Kennedy was forced to undergo the amputation of his leg. Prior to that his father was involved in the drowning of a young secretary, which effectively silenced any notion the senator may have harbored against those who murdered his brothers since, with typical J. Edgar Hoover morality, most of the facts of the case were suppressed and would find a swift and international messenger should the senator from Massachusetts renege on his commitments. And, of course, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Teddy Kennedy suffered a severe back injury in a plane crash. Before JFK's assassination his father suffered a crippling stroke. Sister Rosemary has been mentally handicapped since birth. Kathleen was killed in a plane crash and eldest son Joseph was killed in action during World War II. Let us examine the incredible symbolism deeply related to the Kennedy family and perhaps discern an etiology. The rowan is a death plant in herbal lore and was an ingredient in a sleeping potion witches gave their husbands when they wanted to perform activities to which their spouses would strongly object. The rowan, like so many magical plants, was used by Christians as protection against ill fortune. It was also a means of church decoration and was widely planted in cemeteries in the belief that it would restrain the dead from premature resurrection. In some places the 1st of May was called Rowan or Hawthorn Day or Rowan Tree Witch Day. Peter Lawford, one-time brother-in-law of President John F. Kennedy, was later married to Mary Rowan, the daughter of Laugh-In series television star Dan Rowan. Peter Lawford and Patricia Kennedy Lawford were divorced in 1966 and it was then that Lawford took his Rowan to bed. He also made certain similar arrangements for Marilyn Monroe in the service of John and Robert Kennedy. Marilyn Monroe has been described as the silvery witch of us all, Norman Mailer, and she is important in the fertility and death symbolism pervading the Boston Brahmins. President Kennedy was the recipient of a birthday party in his honor in Madison Square Garden and Peter Lawford invited Marilyn Monroe to sing Happy Birthday there. When she was scheduled to sing, a spotlight was thrown on an empty stage and she was announced 3 times. She appeared after the 3rd call and was introduced as the late Marilyn Monroe. Among her husbands was a Shriner, Mason, named Bob Slatzer. In Slatzer's book, The Life and Curious Death of Marilyn Monroe, circumstantial evidence is presented suggesting that Attorney General Robert Kennedy was somehow involved in the curious death. At no time, however, has Mr. Slatzer referred to Masonic sorcery. The European news magazine Das Neue Blatt details not only the much-touted love affair between the Hollywood star and the president but the rivalry between the First Lady and the star. The Das Neue Blatt article broadly hinted that Jackie helped drive Marilyn to her suicide. Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis has a family and a past at least as strange and enigmatic as that of her deceased first husband. Mrs. Edith Bouvier Bale was the sister of John Bouvier, the father of Jacqueline. Mrs. Bale and her daughter Edith, Eddie, lived in a state of wretchedness and destitution in a decaying mansion in East Hampton, Long Island. Eviction proceedings against the Beals were initiated because the women were discovered to be living in total squalor amid piles of empty pet food cans, newspapers and assorted filth. For some reason, Madame Onassis permitted a film crew to record the degradation of her aunt and niece, and anyone viewing Grey Gardens will certainly attest to the House of Usher eccentricities of the pair. As an analogy of control, it is interesting to note the superstition that a peculiar rapport occasionally exists between owners and domesticated animals, and that the condition the Bale mansion was in reflects a reversal of roles and control in the master-pet relationship. Mrs. Edith Bouvier Bale is now deceased, and in a photograph in the Buffalo Evening News of September 27, 1977, daughter Eddie is shown pawning her jewelry above a caption reading "Hard Times." John F. Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917 at 83 Beale Street, Brookline, Massachusetts. Beale are names associated with the Kennedys through the magic and mystery of words. Beale onomatology is rendered thus: El Bel Baal Beal Beal Baal. El is said to be one of the Hebrew names of God, signifying the Mighty One. It is the root of many other divine names and therefore, many of the sacred names in Masonry. Approximately 1 mile from Lindisfarne, the Holy Island/Holy House, is a barren place known as Beale. Lindisfarne is associated with Heredom, and the legends of King Arthur, the Round Table, Merlin, and other Camelot stories, as well as the Scottish Black Watch. Bouvier means cowherder, and Look magazine has traced this family to Grenoble, France, where their first mention appears in 1410. Jackie's great-great-grandfather, Eustache Bouvier, fought in a French regiment under the command of George Washington while his elder brother Joseph remained in France. Look magazine located Mrs. Kennedy's Bouvier relatives in the ancestral town, and the incontrovertible evidence of who they were brought them great relief and much joy because, as Mama Bouvier put it, "We know what they have been whispering about us. We had to swallow our tongues. Now they can say no more." Arrangements were made for a delegation of Bouviers to journey to Paris and meet with their famous relation while the president was conferring with de Gaulle. During this period, a painting of the renowned Pont Saint-Esprit, located in ancestral Bouvier country, was painted by the brother-in-law of Marcel Bouvier and shipped to the White House. This spirit bridge is equated with the Bridge of Souls, which in turn linked with the Bridge of Dread, Bain Bridge, Log of Lerma, Al Sirat and Sinvato Paretu. Such bridges are symbolically associated with death, and crossing them can be a difficult and harrowing experience. Cf. Poe's Never Bet the Devil Your Head and Kipling's The Man Who Would Be King. 2 French radio reporters drove Marcel and 18-year-old Danielle Bouvier to the Paris reception for themselves and the Kennedys. After traveling some 100 miles, their car struck a tree and Danielle was killed. With her had been a beribboned box 9 which contained a gift for the First Lady, to whom it was addressed as "For my dear cousin." Inside was a tiny nightingale broken in its gilded cage. Danielle is the feminine form of Daniel, and Daniel is a Hebrew word meaning "God is my judge." News reports failed to mention the type of tree involved in the crash which took away Danielle and ruined her nightingale. Whether or not it was a thorn tree of the rowan type, legend has it that a nightingale sings with its breast pressed against a thorn. Another story with a nightingale theme is the tale of Tereus, king of Thrace, who wanted to make love to Philomela, the sister of his wife, Procne. Philomela was eventually forced to submit to Tereus, who removed her tongue so that she could not relate what happened. By weaving a cloak in which she described the horrors to which she had been subjected, and by having it delivered to Procne, great tragedy and hysteria ensued. Procne seized her son Ides by Tereus and, after cooking him, served the meat to her husband. Tereus discovered the deception and murder and pursued the women, one of whom was transformed into a swallow and the other into a nightingale. Tereus was changed into a hoopoe. The god Zeus effected the transformations. The myth is allegedly an explanation for the melancholia of the Song of the Nightingale. Delos and Apollo and other island rituals. The island of Delos is the reputed birthplace of Apollo and Diana. It is located in the southwest Aegean Sea and is considered the domain of Hecate, the patroness of the infernal arts. Delos is alternately known as the Island of the Dead. There is nothing more appropriate for the wife of a slain sun god than to pilgrimage to Delos, as Jacqueline Kennedy did. She also journeyed to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, as well as to the ancient Greek theater situated above Delphi. It was here that the former First Lady performed what is known as the rite of greeting the sun, a fixture in mythology of great antiquity. One might observe that Mrs. Kennedy performed her sun greeting with the expertise of an Aleister Crowley. Some time before she made her Apollo-oriented pilgrimage, she was photographed wearing a large diamond sunburst on her head. Then she was reported to be doing some Greek island hopping on the yacht North Wind, owned by shipping magnate Markos Nomikos. The island of Epidaurus was one of its ports of call, where Jacqueline Kennedy attended Sophocles' Electra by the National Theatre of Greece and then moved on to Hydra, an island named for the dreaded monster serpent whose 9 heads were capable of generation after decapitation. What then happens to the credibility of the Hercules tale in which the hero slays the creature by this very means? Another important island in Mrs. Kennedy's highly symbolical peregrination is Santorina, Thera, an island often connected in folklore to the island of the vampires or sucking fairies. In fact, Santorina shares the same reputation for vampires as Haiti with zombies or the Dominican Republic with the CIA. According to these stories, there was at least as much sucking transpiring on Santorina, Thera, as on the island of Lesbos. The Gouffre de Sátelier is not far from Santorina, and the origin story of this whirlpool is similar to the one surrounding the head which Hugh de Paganis, Hugh of the Pagans, is said to have fathered. The whirlpool supposedly was created by a head that was born as the direct result of necrophilia. In the case of Hugh de Paganis, the first Grand Master of the Knights Templar, he became the father of a head through a process in which he engaged in magical intercourse with a corpse. India, Pakistan, and the cowgirls Mrs. Kennedy had been accompanied on her Modem Day Odyssey, which was actually a foray into mystical toponomy, by her sister, Princess Lee Radziwill. In 1962 they had gone to India and Pakistan on what was described as a semi-official holiday and goodwill tour. And indeed they were lavishly hosted by President Mohammad Ayub Khan and Prime Minister Nehru. The people of India referred to the First Lady as Amriki Rani, the Queen of America. Jacqueline Bouvier, cowgirl, Kennedy and Caroline Lee Bouvier, cowgirl, Radziwill visited the shrine of magic and mysticism, of fertility and death, the Taj Mahal. It represents the religious beliefs of the Bhagavad Gita and the Puranas, whose ancient texts relate the tales of Vishnu and Krishna. The latter was born among cowherds close to the Yamuna, or Jumna, river, and it is said that this descended one was protected from magical attack by cowherders. The attackers being sent by the demon king Kamsa, as related in the Mahabharata regarding the kings of Pakistan. Krishna was strikingly handsome and engaged in romantic dalliance with some cowgirls. This was described as a transcendental experience in poems by the Bengali, Javadeva in the 12th century and another named Pupa Goswami in the 16th century. Whether or not the Bouviers were able to enter a perfumed garden was not disclosed, although Mrs. Kennedy described a perfumed, Shalimar, garden as even lovelier than dreamed, and explained that all my life I've dreamed of coming to the Shalimar Gardens. Perhaps this was mere diplomacy, but if it were not, then it is certainly of some significance when a cowgirl reveals that a perfumed garden takes precedence over many of the other marvels she has witnessed in her marvelous life. Cf. The Perfumed Garden, Tran. Richard Francis Burton. If it is possible to escalate these marvelous doings to yet another order of magnitude, we find the Princess and the First Lady at the Khyber Pass near the home of the legendary Himalayan Yeti, Bigfoot, etc., being entertained by bagpipers in Scottish-type dress. In Karachi, Pakistan, President Mohammad Ayub Khan made Mrs. Kennedy a present of the magnificent horse Sardar, a descendant of Solaris, son, Solar of course, who was the one-time winner of Britain's Ascot Derby. Sardar would later participate in the funeral of John F. Kennedy. Finally, Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Radziwill met the Khan's camel driver, Bashir Ahmed, and were given a ride, in more ways than one. So we have cowgirls on the camel which would be taken to the White House, Camelot, by Vice President Johnson, Mac Bird. Set v. Mystical toponomy. Mystical toponomy pertains to the magic and mystery of words, word wizardry, and the Masonic science of symbolism. while it differs from the old straight track rediscovered by Watkins in the early part of the century in that his alignments or ley lines pertain strictly to the uses of earth-sensitive sites or power sites for ancient religious uses, and no one has thus far documented any political or modern Kabbalist or Sorcerouse uses. In considering my data, it would be helpful to consider a dictum of Einsteinian physics: a science few would accuse of fanaticism or irrationality, although the charges could certainly be made from a rather unconventional perspective. Time relations among events are assumed to be first constituted by the specific physical relations obtaining between them. My study of place names imbued with Sorcerouse significance necessarily includes lines of latitude and longitude and the divisions of degrees in geography and cartography, minutes and seconds. Let us take as an example the Mason Road in Texas that connects to the Mason Noel Bar and the Texas-New Mexico, the land of enchantment, border. This connecting line is on the 32nd degree. The 32nd degree in Masonry of the Scottish Rite is the next to the highest degree awarded. When this 32nd degree line of latitude is traced west, into the land of enchantment, it becomes situated midway between Deming and Columbus, NM. Slightly to the north of the town of Columbus are the Tres Hermanas, Three Sisters, mountains. It is approximately 32 miles between Deming and Columbus, and the Three Sisters Mountains are a minute and some seconds south of the 32nd degree line. When this line is traced further to the west, it is found to pass the ghost town of Shakespeare at a distance south of the town that is roughly equivalent to the distance which the 32nd degree line passes north of the Three Sisters Mountains. The names Shakespeare and the Three Sisters find their connection in the tragedy of Macbeth. When this 32nd degree line is traced some little distance farther west, into Arizona, it crosses an old trail which meandered north of what is now another ghost town, but which at one time was the town of Ruby. Part of the old winding trail became known as the Ruby Road. The town of Ruby is established to have acquired its name officially on April 11, 1912, when a post office commenced operation. The town became notorious for many brutal murders which had ritual aspects. 4 of these homicides occurred in a store attached to the post office which had been erected over the grave of a Catholic priest. Continuing on with mystical toponomy, one encounters the fact that the Ruby Road twists north into the area of 2 mountain peaks that are known as the Kennedy and Johnson Mountains. Johnson Mountain is supposedly named after the general manager of the Peabody Mining Company, who also had a town named after him, which was the location of the Keystone and the Peabody copper mines. The 32nd degree of latitude is but a few seconds from Johnson. In this frontier town on a December evening, 1883, a man known as Colonel Mike Smith and a man called Mason were ambushed by gunfighters described as being of questionable reputation and questionable character. These terms are employed in Masonic writings. He, Captain William Morgan, was a man of questionable character and dissolute habits, and his enmity to Masonry is said to have originated in the refusal of the Masons of Leroy. Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. This attack on Mason and Smith, occurring as it did on the 32nd degree line near Keystone, is of ritual significance reminiscent of some other disputes along a certain Mason-Dixon line. A keystone is the designation for the stone at the apex of an arch which, when set in place, keys or locks the whole. A symbolical keystone is vital to the legend of the Masonic Royal Arch degree of York. The earliest known record of such a degree is in the annals of the city of Fredericksburg, Virginia, on December 22, 1753. Fredericksburg is also the location of the House of the Rising Sun, a Masonic meeting place for such notables as Founding Fathers George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, of Hellfire Club fame, and George Mason. The Royal Arch, the ancient York Grand Lodge, allegedly went out of existence at the same time as the Grand Mother Lodge, and all other lodges of this rite followed it into extinction. Certain Masons have admit that one of its degrees, the Royal Arch, is neither Arch or Royal Arch. Secretary, Royal Arch Degree, 1759. He continues on to reveal that, the Royal Arch Degree is not just a separate entity now but part of the Masonic system. Had this Royal Arch fallen into the desuetude of the York Rite as a whole, its keystone would be removed and the arch left incomplete. Archmagicians with a faulty arch can be considered to be quite unfortunate indeed. An archmagician of high degree, according to Sorcerer's lore, was the third king of the Jews, who was named Shalama and called Solomon. The principal legends of Masonry emanate from Solomon and the fabled temple bearing his name. Every lodge is and must be a symbol of the Temple of Solomon. Each master in the chair is representative of that perfidious Jewish king. Though not all lodges are willing to frankly admit this identification with the ancient synagogue of sin, there is, in Tombstone, Arizona, one which does publicly adhere to this label. Tombstone, Arizona was connected, by a variety of old trails, to the Ruby Road and the town of Ruby, which witnessed so many brutal killings. It should also be noted that many Mexicans were involved in the Ruby shootings, and Mexico is itself a master symbol of America Mystica and a place where the very foulest deeds of Masonic sorcery and witchcraft have transpired. In 1884, the year General Guadalupe Victories became president, tremendous intrafraternal strife broke out between the York and Scottish Rite, of which, like in America, numerous public officials were members and active participants. This strange Masonic war certainly calls into question the 18th century disbandment of the York Rite, if it was able, some 100 years later, to resist the extremely powerful Scottish wing. If this appears to be a digression from mystical toponomy, it actually is not, for the land of Mexico is riddled with symbol place names which fit into the Three Sisters and 32nd degree symbolism. To summarize the segment, one can chart a trail of symbolism associated with the 32nd degree by means of the Mason Road, Mason Noel Bar, Trace Hermanus, Three Sisters, Shakespeare, Macbeth, Macbird, Johnson Mountain, Kennedy Mountain, Ruby Road, and so on. A note on copper. Arizona is the copper state. Copper, Kypros, is symbolically as well as etymologically associated with Cyprus, Kypros, and Cyprian. The word Cyprian indicates a wanton woman, and this meaning is traced through the word Kypros to Aphrodite, porn, Venus, Alua, the great whore of mythology, and those women who fulfill this role in magic sexualis from time to time are called copper queens or copper queens. An association of the name Cyprus to copper in Arizona is indicated by the Cyprus and Baghdad Copper Company, which operates a mine near Prescott. There is a Copper Queen Hotel in Bisbee, Arizona that was built and operated by a copper company. By this means one can expect to find a number of palimpsests pertaining to sex magic in the state of Arizona. The Canadian connection: shortly after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, a Canadian mountain peak was named in his honor. Kennedy Mountain is located at latitude 60 degrees 20 minutes north and 138 degrees 58 degrees 5 seconds west. The upper part of Canada's Disenchantment Bay touches the 60-degree line. Canada too has a Three Sisters Mountain which lies at 58 degrees. Senator Robert Kennedy made a journey to this mountain and made camp with the Three Sisters Mountain range to his right and the Hecate Strait, a part of the intercoastal waterway reaching almost to Disenchantment Bay, to the left. Before reaching base camp for his high-altitude climb, a base camp situated at Cathedral Glacier, Robert Kennedy stayed at Whitehorse. A white horse is a funerary symbol and is used in Oriental burials. A white stone horse guards the imperial tomb at Nanking. In the Occident, a black horse is employed for funerals, and in the case of the JFK ceremony the mount was Sardar, the horse given to Mrs. Kennedy by President Khan of Pakistan. Actually, Sardar was not black but a red bay and had to be dyed for the occasion, and his illusion could be viewed as a minor reflection of the generally unreal aspect of the entire rite, a ceremony of disenchantment symbolized by the tying of boots onto the Pakistani horse, with the toes pointing backwards. Orange smoke suggestive of the Orangeman was dropped for the Robert Kennedy mountain climbing expedition, which bore mementos of President Kennedy to Kennedy Peak, where they were lodged in the snow and photographed. They were then returned to the Kennedy children for safekeeping. This is a dreadful omen when the talismanic nature of ritual artifacts is considered, if this was indeed a mystical charade. Nevertheless, the record indicates 3 pt109 tie clasps were part of the tokens, and it is not Too far-fetched to envision within the Masonic number 3 and the Masonic rite of the mystic tie a more than mundane intelligence at work. Lady Macbird and the ghosts Lady Bird Johnson went to the ghostly mountains called Los Chizos, which can mean, the ghosts, or, as a corruption of the Spanish hechizo it signifies bewitchment, or in the vernacular of Mexican peasants it means evil spell, as of the type cast by a hechicero and hechicera. You see, dirty greaser witches specialize and are not general practitioners as witches are in so many other countries. Los Chizos lives up to its name by way of ghost stories told about that area, which have to do with stinking Indians, dirty greasers, filthy gringos, and their victims. Even the relatives of the father of Nails, Abu Delaf, are apt to have hechizo trouble as the result of hanging around Los Chizos. Lady Bird made her appearance in the Los Chizos area on April Fool's Day, 1966. Perhaps she was there when fun-loving specters were having a macabre field day. Perhaps Hecate appeared in some crossroad melodrama and the three sisters lectured on mystical toponomy and Banquo talked on Shakespeare. Oh, what a fun time, can imagine it to have been. The Los Chizos Mountains are in the Big Bend National Park in Texas. The park is said to cover 1,100 square miles and has scenery worthy of the Arabian Nights. It is adjacent to such symbolical mountains as the Sierra de la Encantada, Enchantment, Siena del Carmen, Carmen, Charm, Enchantment, and Sierra de la Cruz, Cross. The Sierra de la Cruz is a short distance from Los Chizos on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande, and within that area is the town of Ojinaga. Here is a so-called church which is said to be a home of the devil. The so-called church is erected over a cave which is said to lead to the infernal regions. These are sketching elements having to do with the crucigram in sorcery, to which the so-called Calle Ocho, i.e. Street 8 or the 8-Ball Road, is added. The solution to the puzzle lies in the church near Ojinaga, where the devil is said to have a home, or in the cave beneath it. One may learn more by following the witches from the Calle Ocho to the Figure 8 Road near Crazy Cat Mountain in the El Paso, Texas area. Or for that matter, just watch the witches on Calle Ocho in Miami, Florida, what with that 8-Ball Road being the Tamiami Trail after it enters the city limits. But back to Texas if they didn't get you in Miami. Mrs. Johnson traveled from Big Bend National Park to Fort Davis to some sort of dedication. This military reservation is located very close to Coffin Mountain and Black Mountain. The inversion of the word Davis is Sivad, which is associated with the color black, with a death coach, Koistboder, and with a coffin. Meanwhile, Linda Bird Johnson was on a National Geographic trip whose first stop was at some mountains bearing the name Three Sisters, Tres Hermanas, as well as being sometimes called Three Peaks, Tres Picos, and they are in Monument Valley, Utah. And what of husband and father Lyndon? Was he engaged in some safe and sane pastime or embroiled in some weirdness? At that time, President Johnson was on a trip to the Far East, where he visited the City of Demons and entered the Acre Mosque, where he performed the rite of descalçation, which included a foot washing. Such ablution is widely done in Oriental nations when entering sanctuaries and temples. Whether or not he recited the following words of Macbeth are known only to the initiated few. Will, to the weird sisters, more shall they speak, for now am bent to know by the worst means the worst. For mine own good ale causes shall give way. Am in blood steeped so far that, should wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. Strange things in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned. Set 6. The Lone Pentagram State on November 21, 1963, President and Mrs. Kennedy and Vice President and Mrs. Johnson journeyed to Houston, Texas and the Rice Hotel. The hotel suite they used for their 4-hour visit is called the Gold or International Suite. A solid gold service was used at the meal served in the suite, and a fiery red crab meat cocktail, avec les deux sauces, was served to the President and the First Lady. Does one by any chance think of a red sauce for the gods having anything to do with a sacrificial altar? Does gold pertain in any way to the sun god? Kennedy was certainly given a red carpet treatment. Red is the appropriate color of the Royal Arch degree and symbolizes fire, the symbol of soul regeneration. Adoption of This color refers historically to the regeneration or rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon, and this is the exact meaning of the buttressing of the royal arch degree. For them, the regeneration of the temple and of life itself are synonymous. Houston is a city named after a certain Hugh, Hughes Town, of which we will have more to say further on. Exoterically, the Texas metropolis is a memorial to Sam Houston, the first president of the Republic of Texas. The Houston coat of arms allegedly has been traced back some 900 years to a Norman knight called Hugh of Poitevin, who accompanied the Duke of Normandy in the conquest of England. This Hugh was awarded a parcel of land in Scotland by the former Norman Duke, now first Norman King of England, William the Conqueror. In Scotland Hugh rescued the army of Scottish King Malcolm. Malcolm is broken down thus: mal bad, evil, calm, Icomkill, Lona. Macbeth is buried at Icomkill, and Malcolm is the name of a character in the Macbeth tragedy. Malcolm was crowned in 942 AD and Malcolm II was crowned 1005. In 1040 King Duncan was killed and Macbeth acceded to the throne of Scotland. In the Shakespearean play based on the Holinshed Chronicle, a certain Malcolm became king after Macbeth was decapitated. Possibly Malcolm Seymour, who married Margaret in 1069, is the character upon which Shakespeare bases his tragedy. If one lends credence to historical interpretations, then the city of Houston's namesake, Hugh of Poitevin, rescued the very army of the Malcolm of the play Macbeth. Besides conferring knighthood and a parcel of land on Hugh, King Malcolm also supposedly added to his coat of arms a chessboard designed to join the previous Poitevin heraldry of 3 ravens and a right angle, trying square. The right angle is the only angle recognized in Masonry, and the chessboard is tessellation, which is a trademark of Masonry. Tessellation is derived from the Latin tessella, meaning a square stone. The tessellated trying square of Sir Hugh's coat of arms mimics the floor pattern in the Temple of Solomon. Solomon is one of many persons to whom credit for the invention of the game of chess is attributed. The dove, the raven, and the phoenix are striking symbols of evil, light and darkness. Ravens are associated with battlefields, death, graveyards, and the occult. King Malcolm lastly contributed a winged hourglass, a ribbon bearing the motto in tempore, and 2 supporting rampant greyhounds with chains. The hourglass is to be found in the 3rd degree of Masonry and is a funerary symbol to the extent that it was once accustomed to bury these primitive timepieces with the dead as a sign that time has run out. The coat of arms of the city of Houston is the coat of arms of this very Sir Hugh of Poitevin. In San Jacinto Park stands a monument, a tribute to the fidelity of pioneer Masons. The Rice Hotel in Houston is on the northwest corner of Main St. at Texas Ave. Near the Main St. entrance of the hotel is a plaque which reads, "Site of the Capitol of the Republic of Texas 1837-38-39-42. The plaque was donated by the San Jacinto chapter of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. Construction on the Capitol building on the site of the present Rice Hotel was begun on April 16, 1837, and even before it was completed it bore testimony to its incredible future significance to Freemasonry. While still under construction it served as a Masonic meeting place. Here is the way a news item of December 20, 1837 read: Convention of Master Masons meets in Senate Chamber with members from Nacogdoches and San Augustine attending. Masonic rites of death were also performed in this building, including the first Masonic funeral in the state of Texas. It is not an accident that the slang name for the Rice Hotel is Temple Houston, nor is its symbolical and onomatological connection to the slaughtered president isolated in a few days of his Jornada del Muerto, Journey of Death, Journey of the Dead Man. In Old Houston, very near what is now the Rice Hotel, stood the John Kennedy Trading Post over 100 years ago. Despite the fact that Masons wanted Houston to be the capital, it did not remain so for long. Mirabeau B. Lamar defeated High Freemason San Houston for the presidency of the Republic, and in early January, 1839, he approved a bill moving the capital to Waterloo, a town soon to become Austin. In October of the same year, President Lamar and an official entourage began the long journey to that city. By November 22 the regeneration of the government in its new home was complete and ceremonies commemorating the occasion were to take place in 1840, this was due to a technicality in which the recognized seat would continue to be Houston until the end of the legislative session. The Capitol building was immediately rented for use as a hotel and was named, appropriately enough, the Capitol. Thus, theoretically, the capital of Texas was a hotel. If one were talking in terms that are extra-political, one could say that symbolically the capital of Texas was a hotel. Obviously, in any study of mystical toponomy, consideration must be given to unusual schemes devoted to retaining a particular area of Masonic significance. In 1841, Sam Houston became president for the second time, and in an extra session of the Texas Congress in June 1842 in the Capitol Hotel he cited a fear of invasion by Mexicans as his reason for requesting the capital be returned to Houston. This blatant jingoism resulting in emergency sessions and other Masonic farces can be summed up by noting the meeting place of the Senate during this time, at the Odd Fellows Hall. The latter is of course a clandestine Masonic formation. Houston's reputation as a drunkard and ruffian was well served in this scenario, and the famous archives were ensured. Houston attempted to remove the records of the Republic from Austin to Houston with the use of a crack squad of Masonic henchmen. However, they were stiffly resisted by the people of Austin, who had a cannon and were willing to use it. This war, which is more of a comic opera than a battle, focused public attention on Masonry in the government of Texas as well as on Grand Master Sam Houston in particular. Feelings ran high, but apparently some sort of compromise was worked out, and as a result, the archives and seat of government were maintained at Washington on the Brazos for the year 1843. It is important to note that for a time the city of Houston was a symbol of wanton authority, in that temporarily it was a recordless government maintained solely by Masonic force of arms. Because of the amazement and awe which often sweeps a free people in the wake of a revelation that there has existed in their midst and even in those leaders in whom they placed their trust, a highly secret society with goals and interests entirely in opposition to their own, a propaganda campaign lasting to this day was instituted by Masonry. The broad mantle of Masonry, the mystical darkness of the hoodwink, was lowered over Texas like a bank of oppressive clouds. Imagined virtues of Masons in the Masonic government were extolled, and the tall stories called Texas history were enshrined in the classrooms. The true character of Masons in the Republic of Texas and the symbolical pattern they followed in obtaining control is concealed from the children with pretense. Texas is a state of pretense. It is not simply a coincidence that Texas is a byword for brutality, political corruption, and unheard of violence, and, at one time in American history, masses of people connected these atrocities and scandals with Masonry. Needless to say, this is not the case at present, but the authentic nature of the Kennedy assassination is incontrovertible evidence of Masonic hoodwinking. Another indication of Texas Mason link is in the nature of the Lone Star State, for the star is obviously a pentagram. Albert Pike, the highest initiate in 19th-century American Masonry, a member of the 33rd degree and the supreme commander of the world's most powerful Masonic body, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, described the pentagram as the absolute sign of human intelligence and the actual blazing star so often referred to by the Jewish Kabbalists. Some Kabbalistic and Masonic dogma are identical, and a degree found in the Mother Lodge of the Masonic Rite of France was called the Kabbalistic Companion. Kabbalism, along with alchemy, Hermetic art, is an important part of Masonic sorcery. In the science of symbolism, the pentagram is called holy and mysterious. If the pentagram has one point up, it is representative of the good principle, Yetzer HaTov. If it has 2 points up, it indicates the sinister principle, Yetzer HaRa. The symbolical inversion of this 5-pointed star is as much a part of sorcery as the inversion of words. The pentagram inversion represents a duality, the ambivalence of two opposite autonomous principles symbolically associated with the kingdoms of darkness and light.